Hey, I'm Swudge. So I know Path of Exile 1 League is out tonight, so what better time than to put out a build for Path of Exile 2 that no one is going to be playing for a month. But yeah, I couldn't really wait on this one because I'm super happy with it. This is a very unusual build with a lot of moving parts, but I am unbelievably happy with the way it came together. It's really fun, works very well. It's tanky. It's got a lot of damage, it's got a lot of utility, it's incredibly easy to play, especially compared to my old Chrono build. I am having a blast with this. So this is an Incinerate build, as you can see here. Although you can see that we're actually moving extremely rapidly, right? We're able to keep up with the Twisted Domain wavefront here. And everything's just dying around us, right? Even though I'm just channeling Incinerate for the entire map, right? So so yeah, like this Incinerate cast that I started close to the start, which is fire infused and leaving this delightful ignited ground everywhere. This won't stop pretty much until we get to Zesht. So this is an Indigon build. That's where the build's getting its damage from. And so what I'm doing is I'm running cast on elemental ailment Arc here, and Indigon is, you can see here, just dumping my mana. It's spending my mana every chance it gets to keep Indigon stacks for me and give me a ludicrous amount of increased spell damage. And Incinerate is just a crazy ability for more damage, right? Like it has almost 1000% more damage with the right support gem setup, which is crazy, right? Like, you know, like that with the increased modifier being up around 1000% as well, Incinerate is just getting 100 times boost, right? Like between those two modifier, between the more damage and the increased damage, because they multiply with each other. That's fantastic. So yeah. I'm running around, I'm generating a ton of elemental infusions with siphon elements, and then Arc is just shocking. Arc is dumping mana and shocking everything, and it's shocking stuff for 68%, which is ludicrous, right? Because Arc has a 50% more shock multiplier, and then we're also just stacking a lot of ailment magnitude to boost our ignite anyway. So Zesht comes up here. And yeah, he doesn't last very long at all, right? There it goes off. You can see that shock's there, that 68% shock. And he kind of just falls over. So yeah, the build comes together like this, it plays like this. It just kind of channels Incinerate for long periods of time with barely getting any move speed penalty reduction at all because of the Ascendancy choice we've chosen. And you can see here, like, even if you get a luckier crit early on, then yeah, like the damage just absolutely melts pinnacles. So yeah, I'm really happy with this one. It plays very well. It's much more fluid than the Chronomancer was. It maps a lot better than the Chronomancer did. It's not a starter build at all. You will need to invest into this because it has some kind of semi-expensive requirements, right? But I'm not a good farmer. I can't farm for Jack in this game, so nothing here is too particularly expensive at all. So yeah, so in this video I'm going to go over how the build works, and yeah, this is definitely one to watch for next league. I think we're probably going to see some nerfs to Ataluis, so yeah. And just to show you a little bit more about how it maps here, just a little breach footage, it maps pretty smoothly. Things die pretty quickly, you have more than enough damage to clear pretty much everything very easily, because Incinerate just is a kind of silly skill if you can make it fast, which we can. So yeah, so I'll go over how everything works in this build. So I had the idea for this, and I've been workshopping it with my friend DasMeAyy. Shout out to them; they've been a huge help in bouncing ideas off and supplying some ideas for the build. So yeah, big credit to them too.
Better than coin.
And just a little Empowered Doriani Citadel kill here, just to show the bossing setup. So you can see the nice thing about this build compared to the Chrono that you'll immediately see is that it has way less setup. You can pre-cast everything. I didn't even do it properly in this, so the kill was a little slower, but yeah, you put your curse down, you put your curse ground down, and then you channel Incinerate while the boss is spawning in. When it does spawn in, your Incinerate is already stacked, it's on curse ground, you're good to go. It's just significantly cleaner than before. Really like it. So I'm kind of known for my Chrono builds in Path of Exile 2. Chrono is a very underplayed Ascendancy, 2% on the play rate, 1% before I put out my video on the Ignite Chrono. So it's rising steadily, but people still generally don't want to play Chrono, and I think for good reason, right? Black's damage scaling in its current form. Its new curse that it got is really clunky to use. It's definitely one to watch. I think it's going to get changes in 0.4. But for the time being, the damage scaling options are a little anemic, right? Gemling Legionnaire is even less played, right? The only ascendancy in the game that is less played than Gemling is Smith the Katava. And most people on Gemling are playing, the usual kind of Louis kind of fare. You'll see some kind of attack builds. You'll see a lot of builds here that are like, doing fizz damage, and then a lot of builds that are doing lightning damage and this kind of thing, right? Very few of these are doing fire damage, and the ones that are using physical attacks and things like that. So here on PoE Ninja are the people using Indigon this season, and it's not a very long list at all. You can see there are only 37 characters playing it, and of those, only 2 are Gemling Legionnaires. The vast majority of people are trying to play Chrono with this. A few people trying to play Stormweaver and Blood Mage, usually forcing some kind of hard casting tech that uses a weapon implicit skill. Those don't cost mana, so you can stack the Indigon, and then with a spell that costs mana, kind of you're dumping mana on that, and then you're doing most of your work with the actual spell that is tied to your weapon implicit. I've tried setups like that. I personally find them to be a little clunky. So I went instead for something that... So Incinerate here is still my main damaging skill. Incinerate is still the thing that kills people. It's just that I am generating mana and dumping mana using trigger skills instead, using Cast on Elemental Ailment. And there are some really fun things you can do when you are an Indigon character and you're not specialised into any one particular damage type. So I'm going to have a quick look at the gear now. So the gear, of course, Indigon front and centre. Indigon, my beloved. So what's important here is that you have a low roll on increased cost of skills. This being at 35% is huge. Rest of it doesn't matter too much. Just have this low, and you want ideally a high spell damage. These are pretty cheap. These are not expensive at all. This is just a two socket corrupted one. Nothing really special about it other than just it's well rolled. So that provides all the increased damage we would ever want. The second unique I'm using right now is Cloak of Defiance. This is not something you use in the final version of the build. This is just like I would love to get a rare chest. Instead, that packs a ton of spirit and the damage taken from Mana Before Life desecration suffix, which would let me get far more mana and via energy shield conversion from Eldritch Battery. But for the time being, this is just really affordable. I bought this was an exceptional one with 3 sockets that I bought for 1 Divine and Corrupted. And I was kind of angling for a 4th socket, but I'm kind of happier with the 5% additional damage reduction that I wound up with here. Just driving up that Fizzmax hit is super important for this build to be able to survive big boss slams and things like that. So this is just great. This is just great, and it wasn't expensive at all, right? It's just a well rolled exceptional Cloak of Defiance. These are not expensive because it's not an end game item. It gets replaced. Another unique I'm using right now is Prism Guardian. Prism Guardian is a shield. It enables us to block, and then it also gives +1 max spirit per 25 max life. So this is letting me perfectly pretty much meet my spirit requirements of the build, which are pretty high. We can see here that Cast on Elemental Ailment, Blasphemy, and Siphon Elements. These 3 are my mapping auras, and then right now, the sad thing about running Prism Guardian, like the fact that my spirit isn't tied to my chest and amulet solely, means that Blasphemy gets turned off for bosses. In the final version of the build, that's not the case. You're able to keep Blasphemy up for bosses once you have a very good rare body armor for it. But I'm just not there yet. So for the time being, Prism Guardian, very nice solution for this. Again, dirt cheap. Bought this for like a Divine maybe or something like that, right? A 2-socket Corrupt that was pretty well rolled on the elemental resistance. Perfectly cheap. Then Dream Fragments. If you're a mana stacker, like we are to some extent, this is just a great ring. It's cheap. I corrupted this myself for the rarity, which made me very happy. Cannot be chilled or frozen. Wonderful. Simply wonderful, right? That combined with Unwavering Stance, literally nothing is capable of stopping me when I'm going through a map. I just proceed through and kill everything. Then we have a Darkness Enthroned here. I'm using a relatively cheap one. This was a few exalts, I think. You know, I brought one with the Lightning Res Corrupt to just help out my resistances while I don't have access to a rare chest. And 97% increased socketed effective items, and then I'm running these Farrell's Runes of Grace here for reduced movement speed penalty from using skills while moving. And I'm also using that on my boots as well. So this 35% movement speed that you see here on my boots is the only movement speed I have, right? But it's still reasonably, you know, this is still nippy enough, right? Running around at, you know, 147% or so movement speed, a little higher if you're getting hit by stuff. That's great. And I have such little move speed penalty, right? Like, I'm barely slowing down to cast stuff, right? Which is great. And when I'm channeling Incinerate, yep, it's not taking that much of a movement speed hit at all. Right? It's really not, which feels really great while you're mapping. So being able to Incinerate while you're moving at around 126% movement speed is fantastic. It's like having a Roa when you don't have Roa for your class. So yeah, as for the other gear here, it's just kind of, you know, like wands to boost damage with all spell skills. A bit of flat increased spell damage here helps out a lot, because even without this, everything still dies with Incinerate. But this is nice for getting the cast on elemental ailment stacking high enough. Even when, you know, so I can just run in, even if I don't have any Indigon stacks at all, I can just run in and start incinerating, and then it's going to those cast on elemental ailment is going to provide enough energy to keep triggering Arc and stack and maintain Indigon for me. I mean, once Indigon's already stacked, you're fine, right? Like, you generate way more energy than you need, but this is just to get it started. It feels really nice. And then it's just a smattering of gear that provides a bit of life and mana, and some elemental resistances where I can pick them up. Able to get a decent amount of chaos res on this right now, 58%. So yeah, it's still not even res capped on the fire. But yeah, wall mapping feels exceptionally tanky. So then, Gem Enthusiast here, great anoint. We benefit from all of these because we are a gem-studded fiend. We are absolutely packed full of support gems. So yeah, so we get 5% max life, mana, and movement speed. Fantastic. No better anoint in the game. And then +3 spell skills and 45 spirit on Amulet. This is not a high bar to clear. I would stress that, like, a lot of these affixes are dead, right? So 22% of damage taken recouped his life. I don't care about that. I don't need it at all. Yeah, like, reduced freeze duration on me. I can't be frozen. Totally useless. Totally useless. Yep. So and this wand was like a divine. These gloves were less than a divine. I think these were 20 exalts, and I bought them and desecrated them myself. So I just find something that had good fire res, good lightning res, max life and mana, because people generally want gloves that you know, rare pieces that have stack multiple defenses together, especially for energy shield builds. But I don't really care, right? Like, the taking a mana roll here instead of a giga stacked energy shield, perfectly fine. Don't lose that much mana at all. So these were 20 exalts. I just did a basic desecration. I got lucky on the cold and chaos res. Perfect. Wonderful pair of gloves. I even forgot to socket them before I corrupted them, which is why they only have one socket. Which I'm very sad about, but yeah. And these boots were, I think, purchased for a divine god knows how long ago. They were repurposed for my chrono build, which is why they have this awful freeze duration thing on them. But yeah, increased socket affected items here would be fantastic, but the build doesn't need them to work, right? It's absolutely fine. On the weapon swap, I picked up this wand for maybe 2 or 3 divines, because it has this fire spells corruption enchant here, which is basically like having a free rune plugged in for me for my Incinerate damage, which is nice. One of the free wisdom runes, so yeah, I'll take that. Cast speed, dead affix, don't need it. Damages extra lightning, kind of nice for guaranteeing the arc will just shock everything. Same for the increased chance to shock. You don't really need that much more damage on this, right? I don't miss the spell damage. I already have like 1000% from Indigon. It doesn't really matter. And then if you want to scale your damage here, nothing is better than a focus for the +3 spell skills. It's just such a huge more damage modifier when you stack spell skills, right? I mean, my Incinerate is level 35 in this setup, right? Which is more than sufficient. So yeah, all in all, extremely kind of cheap gear. You know, this didn't take much to assemble. The one expensive thing I have on right now is Rite of Passage, right? This dropped from my friend. They were then going to take a bit of a break for the game, so they passed it on to me. This is very expensive. This is what, like 50 divines or something like that, which is kind of crazy. But Possessed by Spirit of the Bear is just fantastic for mapping for 20% increased max life and 20% reduced damage taken. This is basically most of the reason why I just don't die when I'm mapping. So yeah, that is. I have a feeling that this might be kind of required if you want to play the build and never die. If you're fine dying occasionally while you map, you're probably fine without this, or maybe you could just find a way to stack more life and mana. But yeah. This is not a super expensive build, right? You could assemble this gear relatively cheaply apart from the charm. Outside of the charm, you could cover this on a 20 divine budget, no problem. Absolutely no problem. Maybe even on a 10-15 divine budget. Absolutely fine. So let's have a look at the passive tree and how that's set up. So this is a typical passive tree that likes taking jewels, so it runs around the outside of the tree, and it also has to run to the opposite side of the tree from Gemling and where it starts to pick up this nice mana cluster over here along with Eldritch Battery. So we path all the way along the outside, like this, and there are very, very few increased damage modifiers in this tree. Very few damage modifiers at all, actually. The only increased damage on the entire tree is Arcane Intensity, just because it's really efficient. We're stacking over 3,700 mana, so this gives over 100% increased spell damage. That's just nice to take for 2 points, especially when the small nodes over here are mana regeneration, which the build really likes. So yeah, so there's no increased damage here. Where is the damage coming from then? Well, the damage comes mainly from it just comes from Indigon and Incinerate, right? If we look at the calcs here for Incinerate, 12 stacks, you can see that Indigon, the current mana spend, I've got it configured to spend. So this is 3,200, which you can see our mana regen is close to 900, so this is very fair, I think. It's very, very easy. Indigon will basically spend as much mana as you generate in its steady state. So when you're incinerating down a dense group of mobs, this will stack up to around 3,200 very, very quickly and just kind of maintain itself there. So this means that Indigon is giving 768 increased spell damage. That's a huge amount. And it's more than enough, especially given how crazy Incinerate is for more damage, right? Fully stacked Incinerate is 30% per Incinerate stage, 12 stages, 360% more at max, which is huge. And the downside in exchange for this is that Incinerate normally slows you to a crawl and has a finite source of fuel. But if you can get around that, which this build does, then you just get access to a skill that has almost 1,000% more damage, and an item that gives you 1,000% more increased damage, which means that even in the mapping setup here, where I'm wearing a shield, and I'm only using a +4 spell skills wand, without any additional spell skills on the, this is so budget. I'm not even slotting the extra chaos here because I was doing some testing with wands. This is just one extra fire damage rune on a +4 all spell skills. So yeah, this is absolutely fine. So the net result is that even with the shield on, even with Prism Guardian on, you're still getting out an Ignite magnitude that's around 650k while mapping, which is enough to kill absolutely everything, right? And you can just double check here. So Despair is disabled because I'm not using Despair while mapping. So this is a fair reflection of the build's mapping damage for sure. So what does the tree pick up then? Well, the tree wants to pick up 4 keystones in particular. The first down here is Unwavering Stance. Now, cannot dodge roll or sprint. I'm not going to lie, that can be a little painful. You don't notice it too much when you get really high movement speed. So I'm at around 150% right now, which is before any movement speed on my gear at all, apart from a 35% modifier on my boots. Don't have any increased socket effect items. It's still quite budget. And I'm still running around maps anywhere between 148 to around 155% movement speed, depending on how many times I've blocked recently. Because the build can slot in a Val Pact from nothing and splash these movement speed nodes down here. So it's fast enough, even at this kind of budget level, to feel pretty solid while you're clearing. And that I don't miss the sprint too much. Don't miss dodge roll at all. Dodge roll's crap, but I don't. The sprint that's tied to it, yeah, you might miss that a little. But in exchange, never being able to get light stunned is phenomenal, right? Because this is a build that doesn't stack a huge amount of life, And so this lets you not invest anything in stun threshold whatsoever, because you can't scale your stun threshold off mana. So this is perfect for us. The second, going in order around the trees, elemental equilibrium, infusion remnants you create are always a random element. So because we're burning down everything constantly, we would normally just generate an absolute ton of fire infusions, and we're shocking stuff. We generate some lightning infusions, but not generally, I think, enough to sustain Arc being empowered pretty much with every cast. This just means that you get plenty of lightning infusions, so that while you're mapping, all of your arcs, are infused, and which means they do 200% more damage, and they chain an additional 5 times. Which is really nice for clear. Some, if you get these powerful enough, they can just kill enemies on weaker non-delirium content outright, and if not, they're going to shock 13 enemies around you for a huge shock effect, which we'll get into later. Then we go over here. We have Whispers of Doom. This is for the curse setup, which I'll get into in a second. But we run a blasphemy, enfeeble, and temporal chains to meet the tankiness requirements of the very hardest content. And then this is a Black Flame build, so you get to have the delightful purple fire. The reason for this is that we don't actually scale chaos directly here on the tree at all. We don't scale any damage type at all, right? Which is great for Indigon, because then all of our abilities are just kind of getting boosted uniformly by the same amount. And also it means that our damage is extra, particularly for Incinerate, damage is extra fire and damage is extra chaos. They will both work for that. Damage is extra cold and lightning won't, because of the way how ignites as those skills deal damage. So this is it's very nice for us to not have to specialize into any one particular damage type. The reason we go chaos is mostly that monsters and bosses tend to have less chaos resistance, right? And there is an affix on maps that has monsters have increased elemental resistances, and this just means that Incinerate doesn't have to worry about that at all, which is great. And it also means that we can run Withering Presence on our weapon swap, which we'll get into in a little bit. And that lets us benefit from Wither effects. Now, just from Withering Presence, you're usually only getting something like 14% increased damage effect on your chaos damage before the boss falls over. But, I mean, together with the bosses having less chaos resistance, that's still a good enough reason to take it, and it's still far more damage than before you get Black Flame. And then the last keystone up here is Eldritch Battery. Eldritch Battery converts all energy shield to mana. We wear a lot of energy shield pieces and convert these into mana to fuel our Mind Over Matter defenses. Speaking of Mind Over Matter, this is a pseudo Mind Over Matter build. You can see here in the calcs, I'm running 70% Mind Over Matter, right? And why is this only 70%? Well, the answer is that the life in the block in the mapping setup is perfectly fine taking a little bit of damage to life. There's a lot of life sustain but baked into the build. For relatively little investment, it's stuff we were going to take anyway for the most part. So this is great. And so this means that my mana will it's and that 70% Mind Over Matter is still enough that if I take a big hit, my mana is going to take the fair share of that, right? So it's not going to stress my life before I'm not going to die with mana still up, basically, right? Once I take a big hit, all of my mana will get used here. So, right, I guess we'll talk now about the defenses. Yeah, okay, so weapon defenses. So, alright, so let's talk about defenses now. We have a setup here that uses Blasphemy to provide temporal chains and enfeeble. These are really handy because this build doesn't pack a huge amount of EHP. We're Mind Over Matter enough that all the mana will get used before our life, but also we're kind of spending and generating that mana with quite high frequency via Indigon. So this total mana here, not fully representative, right, of how much of what your EHP is actually going to be like. What we can just do is come in here and cut, save 50% less mana. And ignore the damage, because this is going to affect, obviously, arcane intensity here. That's not my intent. I can't really figure out how to get current mana reduced here. But if I have about 50% less mana, my max hit goes down about 11.2k, which for mapping, more than enough, especially when you bear in mind this build cannot get crit at all. Just cannot get crit. So so blasphemy and temporal chains are the sort of defensive cornerstones of the build, along with our shield and block. So for the aura, we take a lot of aura magnitude in the tree. I bet you almost see no one ever coming down here for this, but this is quite a lot of aura effect. This is 15% and 12, so this is 27% increased aura effect. When you're running 2 defensive curses, that's a lot. And then up here we have curse effect from the Master of Hexes cluster for 18% increased curse magnitude. What is the effect of this in game? Well, that's that my blasphemy applies a 90% slow around me. Now, there's the slow cap is 75% in the game, so this isn't slowing normal enemies any more than 75%, but it does make sure that magic enemies, because of course there's less slow effect on magic rare and unique monsters, there is a benefit to driving this above 75%. You know, there's some diminishing returns, but it's still good. So monsters are going to be slowed, everything around me to an absolute crawl. They're not going to be able to get many hits off on me, and then the hits that they do get off, enfeeble here, this is a blasphemy enfeeble that is still reducing damage on non-unique targets by 41%. That's ridiculous. I've never seen a blasphemy enfeeble that's this powerful before. And so that means that if you're sat in weapon set 1 against a particularly dangerous boss while you're waiting for an opening, you're still applying a 20% damage reduction to them, which is great, right? That combined with the fact that the build can't get crit means that we're more than tanky enough against max hit, despite the deceptively kind of low life and mana that the build runs. So yeah. I've mentioned block as well. The weapon set 1 uses this, it currently uses Prism Guardian, which is like a kind of budget solution for the spirit right now. There are shields that, like, once you can solve the budget on a high enough build with a better amulet and better rare chest, then you can drop Spirit Prism Guardian for either an even more defensive option, or you can go for Charnobog for 50% extra damage as fire, just to get a bit more mapping damage. But you don't really need more mapping damage, right? 621k ignites is enough to kill pretty much everything in the game while you're mapping relatively quickly. So for the primary weapon swap that uses the shield, we take a few clusters here that do 2 things. They scale our block chance up to be around 50%, and they also give us some life recovery on block. Right, these are the points we splash into it. And wide barrier is fantastic here because we don't use global defenses. This build doesn't use armor, evasion, or ES at all. It converts all our ES to mana. That happens before this conversion happens, which is great. So yeah, so this is enough, right? But because we're a 70% mind over matter build, recovering 30 life when you block, when your life is only taking 30% of the hit damage, that's usually more than enough. And I combine that with a single jewel up here that has recovered 2% of max life on kill. And while you're mapping, your life is perma-full pretty much, right? Pretty much perma-full even when you're taking, you know, so long as you're still dealing damage back, which you will be because you cannot be light stunned. And also because of the dream fragments, right, that this build is using, you cannot be chilled or frozen either. So enemies cannot disable you. So you're free to just kill them back, which helps with the life sustain a lot. So this overall works really well. Like, this is an incredibly safe build while mapping, and I actually die less while mapping on this build, far less while mapping on this build than I do on my chrono that has 2k life and 8k energy shield with a ludicrous recoup sustain, right? Because that chrono can get crit and this Gemling can't. That chrono dies way more often than this Gemling does. This Gemling almost never dies while mapping. The only time I've died in the past, I don't know, 100 maps or so, has been when I was running a little too little Chaos Res, and I got shotgunned by a Strongbox's Chaos Orbs, and some other ground effect at the same time, and it just kind of one-shot me. So I tweaked my Chaos Res, and since then I haven't died while mapping once, which has felt great. Onto the secondary swap here. Well, we have... let's just tweak around some settings here. So we'll go to the second weapon swap, and we will re-enable our despair here. And I will take away this silly 50% less mana modifier so the damage is fair. So This goes up quite a lot in the secondary weapon slot, right? We've gone from 600k to 4.6 million. That 4.6 million is more than enough to burn down every single boss and like pinnacle boss in the game before they can get an attack off, before they can do anything to you. And this can scale higher with your investment, right? If you're ever able on the Gemling to drop this when if you can get enough life and mana without the bonuses this is providing, and go into neurological implants for +2 Incin, huge amount of damage, right? That's like 1.5 million more ignite DPS, and then this can scale better with more crit. Right, if you can find a good Megalomaniac to provide some crit clusters, this can go up to like 20 million or so in some of the end game cases that I've been testing, and sort of charting out in PoE. So how does this build do so much damage against bosses when it's not really taking much damage? And when we only do 600k or 600 700k while mapping? Well, that's because of a few things, right? First of all, we stack a good amount of increased magnitude of ailments that we inflict. So this does, which is a great stat for us. This is a wonderful stat. We double dip on this aggressively. First of all, ailment magnitude and ignite is, an ignite magnitude. That's its own multiplicative bucket in your damage calculation. It doesn't stack with increased damage, doesn't stack with anything else. It's just its own thing. So you have 300% more, increased magnitude of ailments you inflict. Your Incinerate is going to deal 3 times the damage of one that lacks that stat. So it's just a great stat. And I also stack it on my gems as well. So on all my sapphires here, I do dual ignite magnitude and ailment magnitude. Ailment magnitude is a wonderful stat because it also boosts shock effect, right? And because this is an Indigon build that isn't really, it's not scaling my chaos damage and leaving the lightning damage to wither on the vine here. It's actually getting a lot of great value off, right? This setup has a really consistent shock application with Arc on the cast on elemental ailment, and those shock effects, because Arc has 50% more shock magnitude, this gets multiplied by any of your increased ailment effect, of which I'm stacking a lot. So I shock targets for 68% right now, which is huge, right? They take 68% more damage. That's where a lot of this damage comes from. It's just shocking targets for 68%, and it's so consistent, right? You can run 100% more shock support on Arc. My weapon swap here, it uses a increased chance to shock thing here. I can't remember the last time I didn't immediately shock a boss the first time I cast on elemental element went off, which is great. And to that end, this cluster over here, we also pick up some increased magnitude of non-damaging ailments to make that shock, to boost that shock up a little more as well, even though it doesn't boost the ignite. Then what we do is we pick up a few crit clusters up here. We have Shredding Force, which is fantastic for us, increased magnitude of damaging ailments you inflict with critical hits, along with 15% increased crit and crit hit and spell damage. Best node in the tree for Incinerate. If your Incinerate can crit reliably, and 16.2%, this crits reliably. Incin is a sustained skill. Every single cast, it casts like 4 times a second, right? So it's rolling to crit 4 times a second. That means the mean time to roll a critical ignite, and one single critical ignite will wipe out a boss. It's around 1.5 seconds. And even if you don't get, even if you low roll and this comes a bit later, or you don't get one at all, you're still doing a ton of damage to the boss, right? Like you're still doing 2 million or so. It's a lot. And to make those crits even more consistent, we just pick up this Careful Assassin and Controlling Magic over here, which gives a little crit damage bonus as well, which is great. I think in a more optimized version of the build, it will stack more crit damage, but this is more than enough, right? As you've seen, it's absolutely more than enough to get everything down. So yeah, that's how the passive tree comes together. And just a little look at the skill setup here, right? So we pack a lot of auras in, as I said before. So casting Elemental Ailment is wonderful here. This, while I'm channeling Incinerate and while I'm hitting targets, it's going to be stacking up, keeping Indigon stacked. It's going to be casting Arc, using my mana, shocking enemies. Great things, love that. It's supported with Shock. Arachiatas here. These are, still expensive, but relative, but not the worst. It's like a 12 divines or something like that. Not too expensive to get, right? Boundless Energy for that increased energy generation, which helps out when Indigon isn't stacked, just to get it stacked and keep it rolling. And then Fluke, Fluke is kind of nice for the recover between 0% and 20% of cost on use. This is very handy indeed. Just helps helps your mana stop itself bottoming out so much, which given you're a mind over matter build and mana is your health resource, this is great. Blasphemy we've already been over here. Just we plug in slow potency here, which just doesn't have any spirit requirement. It just makes temp chains better. Fantastic. Ritualistic curse, 50% increased area of effect, and we don't pay the downside at all because these aren't casted ourselves. This just gives you 50% increased area of effect with no spirit reservation whatsoever. Then mobility does nothing here. This is just for the nonsense gem studded requirement, which we'll get to in a second. Yeah, and then siphon elements. Support this with harmonic remnants and remnant potency, just to make the remnants easier to pick up and more numerous to collect. Then for the bossing setup, withering presence, right? These are low level. I still need to level these at some point, but yeah, these are perfectly fine for the time being. Getting like this will only really stack up to like 14% more increased chaos damage taken for the boss, so it's not a huge amount, but it's there. And then we get to the active skills. So despair is what I use against bosses. What I do here is so increase magnitude is fantastic. How much is this? 97% chaos resistance removed, right? So this will apply half of that to bosses because they take half effect from curses. So you're still stripping like almost 50% of chaos res from boss, setting them up minus 50% for pretty much every boss in the game. That's great. More skill effect duration. This is really nice for two reasons, right? First of all, it keeps the curse for longer. We use curse ground here, so there's a bit of an activation delay, but this kind of works out in the favor actually, because Incinerate still needs to channel anyway. So this is kind of nice, right? You can see it just lasts forever, right? Every boss dies before this will expire. Another nice thing as well is Arcane Surge, right? So you can see here that like we have Arcane Surge on the despair as well. When this procs, I get 20 seconds of Arcane Surge from the increased duration and the more duration, which is just really, really nice for maintaining mana, right? You can kind of see, right? It's regenerating at quite a good clip here, which enables Indigon spending, and it makes you tankier. So this is great. And then mobility, because sometimes you're using this as a mana dump before you engage a pack. You don't need to, but it can often be quicker to do so, rather than just like casting Incinerate and waiting for waiting for Spark to proc to stack your Indigon spell power. So yeah, that works out very well. Then Incinerate, this is almost like running on a 4-link right now in terms of damage, right? So consider casting 35% more damage. This cast speed affects like how your tick frequency for Indigon, which will, if you took this out, it would crit slightly more consistent, but not enough to worry about losing 35% more damage. Version 2, we are just channeling this sometimes for entire, like you see in the Twisted Domain at the start. This just gets channeled the entire map. So yeah, this is just free 40% more damage, just a great jewel. Stoicism 2, even though this says supports attack skills, it's recommended by the game for Incinerate, and I've tested this and it does work for spells as well. So 2% more damage every second up to 20%. Resets if you use a dodge roll or use a travel skill. We can't dodge roll and we don't have any travel skills, so this is just always stacked up to full here. Always just gives 20% more damage to anything it supports, which is great. So yeah, and then we have mobility for this aforementioned less movement speed penalty when moving, which keeps you moving along at a really great clip. So even when you have to channel it for prolonged periods of time, it doesn't really feel bad. You're still getting a decent amount of ground covered while you're channeling. Feels really good. And then Ignite 3. So this is just because Incinerate has this pesky 80% less flammability magnitude. This just means that you're gonna get 200% more flammability magnitude. It just means that it will auto ignite pretty much everything, right? You can kind of see 7 to 11%. As that sort of channels, this will go higher. This doesn't account the Incinerate stages at all. This is just showing you the bonus from Burgeon and things like that, right? You can see as well when you start dumping Indigon mana, these numbers go up quite a lot, right? These ignite values. So that's what kind of enables this to work with just kind of effectively two supports that don't really do much. I mean, you get faster ignites from this. That's great, but that's about all you get. This is the flammability, just to make sure that like even when Indigon is not really stacked and you're just running into a new pack and igniting and incinerating them all, that they're all going to get ignited. That's all. Then Ice Nova, barely use it, but it's kind of like a guard skill in this kind of setup. So because of our keystone to elemental equilibrium, we get tons and tons of ice infusion. So Ice Nova actually applies a really, really good amount of chill here, and it will pretty much always have its cold infused effect, whereby it leaves chill ground, and it has a bigger area of effect. And this Ice Nova has more freeze build up, so this chills targets and slows them down really aggressively. Like, so if it's a rare monster, or say you're running a map that has less curse affixes and you don't feel great, you just cast one of these and you will easily be able to get out of dodge, right? Although I like I said, I almost never use it. It's there just in case. And then the other nonsense skills that you see here, like Essence Drain, Orb of Storms, Galvanic Field, and Mana Drain, these are all just to meet gem studded requirements, right? Because I have 13. So the way the gem studded works is that you have two. If you have like these are weapon swap abilities that are tied to the wands that are on both of my swaps, and each of these only counts when they're active, right? Which is why, even though, like, so the gem-studded configuration that I want, as a little reminder, gem-studded this thing here. So what I want is I want my red and green to have the equally most numerous amount of support gems, and I want my blue to be lower than that. Just so happens that most of the good support gems in this build are blue, so you need a lot of slots for red and green gems just to be plugged in, so that you can never get crit, and so you keep the travel penalty reduction. So in any given setup, I have, so right now these 2 red and 2 green aren't counting, so I have 13 strength, 13 dex, and 12 hints, right? So this is perfect. And then in my weapon swap, exact same thing. So that's the skill setup there, and it's gem studded can be a little annoying, but as you can see, I've still got plenty of leeway here, right? If I wanted to plug in more blue support gems for whatever reason, if I found out one was really good, I could still do that, right? I've still got a little bit of room here, a little bit of leeway. So just a little bit of mapping footage to wind down on for a Copper Citadel. So yeah, this is a pretty quick and dirty video put together because obviously everyone's a bit busy for PoE1. I'm still looking into how to optimize this build and how to enable it at lower budgets, because this is what I want to be playing next league. It's, you know, if nothing gets changed to gut it, and I don't think it will, because nothing this build relies on is particularly overused in the slightest, right? This build is very, it's playing on the fringes of the game, right? This isn't like Atalui's Wrathpith, you know, Tech Rods, which is almost certainly going to get nerfed. This isn't relying on row amount for its mobility. This is playing around in the fringes of the game. That's where I love to be, and it's where you're most likely to see things get buffed. And if things get buffed, you want to be there at the ground level. So yeah. But yeah, I mean, just look at this. This is Incinerate, and it's clearing pretty smoothly, right? Even when I'm lacking movement speed boosts, I'm really pretty happy with this. And then the the regeneration shrine is crazy on this build as well, right? Like on an Indigon, because it scales your mana regeneration insanely, right? You might have noticed if you've gotten one of these and you don't have much life regen, you know, when you get the effect, I certainly don't hear it, but my mana, will regenerate faster than I can spend. Like Indigon will stack to full before I can even spend the mana here. It's kind of fun. And if you get a speed shrine as well, this is hilarious. Like zipping around casting Incinerate at like 200% movement speed. So yeah, super happy with this one. And if you watch this, thanks for watching. And I'm looking to put out a proper guide video on this at some point soon. And I'm looking to also update the chrono as well, because that might be what I have to play to league start in 0.4. My Ignite Chrono build, just super tanky on an incredibly low budget. You know, you can AFK in a Simulacrum on 10 Divines. I've showed that in a video. Some people posted comments about, oh, I'm not really 10 Divines, and others have said, nope, I did it. I did what he said for 10 Divines, and I AFK'd in a Simulacrum. You know, I've finally been able to complete Simulacrum, so I'm really happy with that. So I've not forgotten about this build. I have updated it a bit since the last video. It's now got a much smoother mapping setup using Fireball, so hopefully another proper video on that soon. So yeah. Yeah, I hope you enjoy this, and I hope you have a really fun PoE1 league, and I'll see you for the next one in PoE2.